Now, one of the great things about getting a lot of smart people together in a room are the conversations that take place between presentations. This next one, we've got about a 30-minute presentation, but we're going to try to be very interactive afterwards. So I don't know about you, but I've certainly learned a few things this morning and have jotted down a bunch of questions for individual follow-up. And later in the day, we're going to talk about that. But this next discussion is going to be more how do you deal with a very large restoration project that's got national implications with a focus on data that exists, data that may be sitting on computers somewhere, and data that can actually be used. And we're very fortunate to have Gretchen Ehlinger here with the Corps of Engineers. She's the acting chief for restoration and recovery for the Jacksonville District. She's been involved in Everglades restoration for the past 11 years. Academically, she got her Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Oregon, and then her PhD in Ecology and Conservation Biology from Florida Institute of Technology down in Melbourne. So very familiar with Florida ecosystems and overseeing one of the largest ecosystem restoration projects in the world. So this will be more practical relative to a project and a series of projects. But I think as we all try to figure out how do you use big data to actually accomplish restoration objectives, this should be very instructive. And we'll have plenty of time at the end for discussion. So let me turn that over.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. As you said, I'm here. I'm going to kind of walk you through some real issues that we have in Everglades restoration and some issues with data. I'm an ecologist, a biologist. I work with a lot of data, but I am not a data manager. I don't have that expertise in all the nodes and the different things. So I'm going to present kind of a system that has been developed and kind of our ultimate end goal, but I don't know the inner workings of the actual data itself. But if you have questions on that stuff, I can definitely point you to the correct people within the Corps and within our partnering agencies. But today I'm going to kind of focus on the data that we collect, where we are in terms of the restoration and the data, and how we need to proceed in the future and lessons learned from almost 10 years of data into Everglades restoration. So as I said, I'm going to give you kind of a brief outline of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. I'm not sure how familiar a lot of you are with CERP. And then I'm going to talk about Recover, which is kind of the science behind the Everglades Restoration Plan, and it's very unique in this ecosystem restoration project for the nation and for the Corps. And I'm going to talk about data management and then lessons learned. And I hope this is where we can have a good dialogue, and hopefully I can get some ideas from all the brilliant people in the room on how, some things I may take back to the Corps and to Everglades restoration. So as you see, this is the greater Everglades ecosystem. It's huge from up in Orlando all the way down to the Florida Keys. And as you can tell from this map, it is a very diverse ecosystem. We have all sorts of different areas and types of ecosystems. So of course it is data rich with lots of different types of data that can be collected. And so these are some of the types, and as I said, this is very diverse, and we have water quality data, we have ecological data, we have hydrologic data, all sorts of data that can be collected and that we need to collect in order to look at how well we're doing in the ecosystem restoration. So this is the historic flow of the Everglades, and then the Central and South Florida project came along and prevent flooding, to make it more inhabitable. South Florida, we changed the flow to what we currently have today. And what this means is really that we have, the changes we made have really altered the Everglades ecosystem. And a lot of times we have too much water or too little water. We have too much water in the wrong places. And so the purpose of the restoration is to try to get back to a more natural system. We have over 1.7 billion gallons a day going out to tide, so we're losing that water. to some of the areas south of Lake Okeechobee that really need the water in Everglades National Park. In doing that, we're dumping a lot of water out of the estuaries from Lake Okeechobee into the estuaries, so we have declines in estuarine health, water quality issues. We've had major reductions in wading birds, and a lot of loss of native habitat. You have invasive species coming in, and we have over 70 federally listed threatened and endangered species. So the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, or CERP, is really a restoration plan that is to look at the quantity, quality, timing, and distribution of water in the Everglades. It was approved by Congress in 2000, and it's really to restore and preserve the South Florida ecosystem. As you can tell, it is a large-scale project. You have a lot of diverse communities that we're trying to restore, and we have lots of issues in terms of water uses. There's lots of demand from agriculture, from water supply, flood protection. There's many interests that want the water, don't want the water, and it's a very political project. But it was authorized by Congress in 2000, and it was, which was unique, it was built under an adaptive management framework. And so I'm going to get into that in a minute. But again, here is the pre-dangerous flow, the current flow, and then what we're hoping to have in the restored flow. We can't obviously go back to the pre-dangerous conditions because we have Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, lots of people that we need to maintain the flood protection. But we're going to try to get back to a better flow than what we currently have. And so RECOVER is restoration, coordination, and verification. And when Congress authorized the Everglades Restoration Plan, they recognized that there was a lot of risk and uncertainty in the restoration. And they were very forward-thinking in that they created this group called RECOVER to be the science behind the Everglades restoration. And they actually authorized CERP and did it under an adaptive management framework where the Corps and the partner, the South Florida Water Management District, are required to have this RECOVER group to put the science behind it and have an adaptive management framework where we can take the new information, take the science, use it to make decisions, to provide feedback to how well the restoration is going. And so the role of RECOVER is to communicate and coordinate the science and to really have the science back up the decision making in the Everglades restoration. So what RECOVER is that it is an interagency, interdisciplinary team of scientists, of engineers, planners, resource managers, and it is a group of 10 agencies and 2 tribes that work together and basically ensure that CERP is being implemented with the best available science. And like what we try to do when we meet with this interagency group is we try to take off our agency hats and put on our scientist hats. So when we have our meetings, we try to not take our agency view. We try to look purely at the science and make decisions on restoration based on the science that we're collecting. And so RECOVER also provides a programmatic and a system-wide perspective. So you have individual projects. There's about 60 individual CERP projects that focus on a very small footprint of that actual project. And RECOVER's role is to look at the ecosystem as a whole. So look at the whole system-wide and take a system-wide perspective in how well we're doing in restoration. Because it's great if one project is built and is operational and is getting the benefits that that project thought they were going to get. But if it doesn't cascade down and provide a benefit to the ecosystem as a whole, then we need to look and see what did we miss, what do we need to do to change that. And so there's 3 major components of RECOVER. There's planning, where we're really providing system-wide input into project formulation. So looking at how the projects are formulated, what features are going to be used in the projects. Look at evaluation. So how well are the projects doing? Now we have to set up performance measures, ecological modeling tools to look at how they're how we think that the projects are going to do and what benefits we're going to get when those projects are built. And then assessment, which is the team that I've spent the most time with, is basically measuring the performance of the projects through monitoring. So as we're building these projects and they come online, we need to be able to assess these projects and how well they're doing in terms of getting to the ultimate goals of Everglades restoration. So in monitoring for CERP, we have two major levels. We have system-wide monitoring, and we have project-level monitoring. And our system-wide monitoring is run by Recover, and it is, we have the monitoring assessment plan, which gives a system-wide perspective of the different attributes of the system, and to give a description of how well the system is doing. So right now we're monitoring kind of a pre-CERP baseline, or getting information before a lot of the projects are being built. And so we have, so then as projects are come online, we'll continue running our system-wide monitoring, and we'll be able to see how well we're doing. And if we're not getting the results we think, we can feed that back into the adaptive management framework and make some tweaks to operations or to projects to make sure we're getting to where we need to be in restoration. So currently, the monitoring assessment plan has about 35 monitoring components. It's ecological data, biological, water quality, runs the gamut. We have oyster monitoring, bird monitoring, salinity monitoring, vegetation monitoring. So we run the whole gamut of the types of monitoring that we're doing. And because it's such a large system, we divide it into regions. So we have cross-regional monitoring. And we also leverage a lot of monitoring from other agencies, from universities. So it's a very comprehensive monitoring plan. And so, as I said, the data from the monitoring assessment plan feeds into the adaptive management framework, and basically it's providing a summary of ecosystem changes as CERP progresses. And then also it can pick up major changes that we weren't expecting. And then the other level of monitoring that goes on during Everglades restoration is project level monitoring. And each individual CERP project has their own monitoring that is very much more site specific to, if we fill in a levee and backfill a canal, what are the direct, changes that occur from that. And one of the major issues we've had with the monitoring assessment plan is that CERP was authorized in 2000, and a lot of our monitoring was started in 2004, 2005, and originally the CERP projects were supposed to be built within 10, 20 years. Right now we have a couple projects that are being constructed. The Water Management has moved ahead with some projects, but we're not where we thought we would be at this time frame, 15 years after CERP was authorized. And so we have a lot of baseline data and a lot of data, and so it's harder and harder to justify a maintained monitoring program when we're waiting for projects to come online. So that's something that's factored into not only our monitoring plan, but also some of the data management issues. So for the system-wide data, we do a system status report once every 5 years. We've done, we have to do them once every 5 years. We try to do them a little bit more often if possible. But basically what it is, it's an assessment of the ecosystem. How well is the system doing? Ideally, as Everglades restoration progresses, hopefully the status of the system will be getting better and better. But basically, it's based on hypothesis clusters in each of our regions. It's very science-based, and it's basically a synthesis of our technical data from different geographic regions, and it's to look at how well we're doing in meeting the goals and objectives of CERP. And then again, if we come across unanticipated results, we can look to see what do we need to do to change, or what's the cause and effect of these changes. So this is our regions. We have a Lake Okeechobee region, our northern estuaries that consist of Caloosahatchee, St. Lucie, and Loxahatchee over here. We have the greater Everglades region, and then our southern coastal systems. And that helps us kind of focus the different kind of monitoring in those regions, but we also want to be able to link across the regions. And again, all the monitoring components are linked to performance measures, so we can see how well the projects are performing based on performance measures. And in terms of data, we collect all different types of data. Hydrologic data, ecological data, water quality data, and so what that leads to, so we've been monitoring in some of these sites since 2004, 2005, so we have 10 years or so of data, and a lot of the monitoring we picked up under the map has been monitoring that's been going on by professors for years, and so it kind of continues on. So we have some really long-term data sets already. And so we have a large amount of data, and it's, has a lot of different disciplines. It's some water quality. We have, we use the Self-Florida Water Management DB Hydro database for a lot of the hydrologic data, but and the water quality data, but we don't have a way to link it to a lot of the map data, which is your biological, ecological data. The PIs are collecting their data. We didn't have a system set up when they started their monitoring, so a lot of the data is in spreadsheets on their computers. It's in their own database or an agency database. And then a lot of the data, we have oyster data that's being collected in the St. Lucie and in the Caloosahatchee, but the data formats might not be the same on their spreadsheet. So when you're looking to assess across those two regions, it takes a lot of work to pull the data, reformat, to actually be able to assess the data. So some of the impacts of data management issues is that a lot of times it's hard to locate some of the data, to get your hands on the data, and so it takes a long time to create some of the reports that we want to make. And a lot of times we don't know what other data is out there, so could be some really good information that someone has, but we don't have a way to get that data, we don't know that it's there. And so a lot of efficiency is lost when we're trying to piece together different data sets from different PIs, because a lot of the PIs have their own data sets and they do great assessment of their own data, but when we're looking system-wide, trying to get a system-wide assessment, it's hard to pull different people's data sets and merge them in order to do an assessment in a timely manner. So the goals of data management for CERP really are to be able to access several types of data collected by multiple people in one central location, retrieve it, have it georeferenced, be able to click on a map and see who's monitoring there. This is something that's been, ever since I started working on Everglades restoration 10, 11 years ago, we've been asked by upper management, well, we want to know all the monitoring that's going on in South Florida, so we make sure we're not duplicating efforts, we're not wasting money if someone's sampling right nearby where one of our stations are. And so we really want to be able to look at a map and be able to see what monitoring is there and pull that data out. And retrieve the data in a format that we can then combine data sets so we can actually use them in statistical analyses, in be able to do the reports faster. And then link the water quality and hydrology databases to the biological and ecological databases. A lot of our conceptual ecological models obviously have water management as the drivers, your stressors. We want to be able to capture that link between the two. So this is a very busy slide, but this is our pie in the sky, what Recover and the CERP Information Data Management team has been working on for several years. And it is basically a system where you have your metadata that's documented in Morpho, a kind of off-the-shelf metadata format that would go in to a CERP database along with the actual data. So you'd store your data, and you'd have controls of making sure we're QA, QC in the data. And I'm going to go through each of these steps. This is kind of our pie in the sky, and I'll tell you where we are in these steps. Your data processing, data storage, but then you have where you have your actual data and your database and your spatial data come together so you can actually georeference these sites, pull the data out, and then eventually pull what you need into whatever stats program you're using. So at the core, we love our acronyms. So we came up with the CERP Integrated Database, or SID, and the Everglades Restoration Data Extraction Tool, or EGRET, as a proposed system. This was started back, again, by Recover and the CERP IDM team back in about 2011 or so. And the goal was to extract the data, have the PIs be able to put the data in with the metadata, and then be able to connect to other databases, georeference the data, and then have the data be able to be pulled out, queried, and it would allow for the storage of, many different types of data, water quality, fish, SAV, vegetation, various data types. And so the first step was really to, the first step of this whole system is to gather the data, and again, this uses Morpho and off-the-shelf metadata template. And so the idea here was to have our MAP principal investigators have this template and use this template to then input all their information into the system, and then have the Morpho template as well as the actual data go into the system, and you have these metadata packages. And then you have a dashboard that you could manage these completed packages, and this provide a version control of chain of custody for the data, so limits who can change the data. That's another thing we have, a lot of university professors and agency folks and scientists doing this work who are hesitant to just hand over their data. It's something we've been working with, having them be willing to upload their data to a central database. And then it also provides a dashboard that a data manager or contract manager can review the data, approve the data, or send it back to the principal investigator. So it has these built-in verification points. And then the data would then be loaded into a relational database. You have your location or station information with it, and so then your data can be tied to other applications. We had a monitoring locator application that was created where people really wanted to see where monitoring was going on, so we could leverage the monitoring and not have duplication, and so this would allow for that. And then we get to Egret, which is your data extraction tool, and so you'd be able to pick up, go on a map and click on a site that would pull up the stations, the station names, the data information, and you can search by spatial parameters or your type of data, and then pull it out to export it into a different statistical program or however you want to analyze the data. So that was the big pie in the sky, ideally what we would like to have. And so really what we have to date is that was developed SID was developed as a prototype, and we have the CERP zone, which is a web space that we store all of the CERP documents and data and GIS maps. And CERP zone is a great tool. It recently got turned over to the South Florida Water Management District. It was kind of run by the Corps and the Water Management District, but Department of Defense had some cyber security issues, and so it transferred it over. And so a lot of this progress to date is heavily reliable on funding and resources. And a lot of it is getting buy-in from the PIs to actually put their data in. So where we're at is we have the CERP zone, we have most CERP documents loaded there, we have some of the data in there, and some of the Morpho or the metadata templates in there. And so it's partially populated, but it was kind of a prototype, and over the last few years it's kind of lost some steam due to resource limitations. So that leads me to our lessons learned, and some of our major lessons learned is that the system wasn't developed until 2011, 2012. Most of our map monitoring components started in 2005. So the effort of taking all of their past data and then putting it into a new format with a new metadata template is huge. And over the years, the monitoring funding has been decreased fairly significantly. And so we don't have additional funds to pay the PIs to take the time and go back and retrofit their data to fit into the database template. And then starting from a certain point when the system is up and running, you got to train the PIs on how to put their data in and enforce that they're doing it. And it'd be great if there could be automated uploading tools. I'm sure there's brilliant people out there that can do that, but it's just a matter of making it as easy as possible for the PIs to use a system like this. And again, dedicated resources and staff, having the staff that know how to do this and have the time and the funding to do it, and linking to other databases. We use the USGS Eden water level services on a daily basis. Most of our PIs use their water level data for some of their ecological planning tools, for their assessments, and so it'd be great to be able to link to that. We're never going to be able to upload all the USGS data to a system like this, but having those linkages would be key. And then having the users like myself who need to be able to pull data and do the assessments we need to do on a system-wide scale, be able to understand how to use the system in the best way possible. So when we need to look at, a project comes online, we need to look at a specific area in Biscayne Bay, we can pull out the data from Biscayne Bay, manipulate it in a fairly easy manner to get the information we need. Because all this data from the monitoring assessment plan and from the project level monitoring is going to be used by decision makers to see how well we're doing in our restoration and which projects are we want to focus on next. So it's really how do we use the data that we have, that we've now collected for 10 to 15 years, to feed into the decision makers at the Army Corps, who a lot of them are engineers that don't understand the science behind it. So it's our role as recover scientists to boil that information down to some sort of management decision that they can make. So with that, I will take any questions.
I don't know this group to be shy.
Are you working with any video data that you have to store and metadata and archive and all?
Not at the moment. Right now, we're not doing that. We do have some video transects of some seagrass beds, but not. They're not being used in our assessments. It's kind of but we are looking towards doing more remote type of monitoring. Especially we have unmanned flight vehicles in the Everglades, because part of the problem with getting into the Everglades to monitor is actually getting to the sites. But right now we don't have any video, but that'd be another thing we'd have to figure out how to tie in.
Can you talk some about the outreach program or user training or some tools, some sort of resources that are available?
Yeah, so right now all the information is on the CERP zone, and that's a secured site for people who work in Everglades restoration, so agency folks, the PIs, and so there were, once this was kind of rolled out, they have some training sessions for the users. You have to be sponsored by the Corps, the Water Management District, to be able to log into CERP zone, because you have the issue of PIs who, they're giving us their data on an annual basis, and they want the opportunity to, publish their data, in peer-reviewed journals before, it's out to the public, and so we have issues with that. So we have a limited number of people that can access the site, but we've had training programs for the prototype available to the people who use the system, but we haven't gotten past the prototype phase to actually implement, it on a broader scale.
So, kind of carried over what you just said there about access, limited access, the water management district is generating any of that data or giving any of those contracts. That's all open for public record, and I'm assuming that anything the Army Corps is as well. How can you limit the access to these people who contract to do the work?
There's nuances in. I think it's different now because we moved our database. We used to have two separate. We had one of our CERP zone databases at the Water Management District. That was open to the Sunshine Laws. For the Corps, it's not. I mean, if there's a FOIA request, we have to give them the information. Yeah, and if they request it, we have to give it to them, but we're not providing open access to the data. So yeah, I mean, if they ask for it, we have to give it to them, but we're not giving everyone, here's, access to all this data.
I think it's a great idea to bring all the data together. I was just wondering, since you have various principal investigators and they might have a little bit of variability in how they do the methods, has there been a concerted effort to determine that variability so you know what the signal to noise ratio is when you get that data and start analyzing it?
There's been some effort in that, especially when we're looking at SAV monitoring in our southern areas versus in our northern estuaries. We're working on that, but at the same time, there's a hesitancy because a lot of these data sets have been collected, since well before CERP was envisioned, and so you don't want to necessarily go through and change their, methodology, partway through their, through their collection. But yeah, there has been some, analysis of the signal to noise.
Yeah, you don't want to think about it. I was wondering if different investigators have like you do a Bronze-Blanquet approach. I mean, just so that like one guy calls it 2, the other guy calls it 4. You just kind of want to know that.
Yeah,
So you do an
yes.
analysis, so when
Yeah.
you analyze 30-year trend of data, you'll know that there's a little bit of noise.
Yes, we've been doing that analysis. I think you touched on this at the beginning of your talk, but could you speak a little bit more? That slide that you showed about the data flow is sort of, looked really complex, but it's also part of a wider adaptive management problem where that, needs to sort of, everyone needs to come together, and at one point review what's been found out in a time period and then sort of adapt and manage. Do you see that as happening? And the second part is it changing with the new rapid planning or step? Are there changes to?
Yeah, so this data set, this data process is different than the adaptive management process, but what this would do if we had a system like this that was working really well, it would help in the adaptive management framework because it would give us the information faster because we'd be able to get to the reports and do the assessments we needed to do ahead of time. But in terms of adaptive management, we are able to, take some of the information that we're getting and, make decisions. And the thing about the Central Everglades Planning Project is that the adaptive management plan, there's new adaptive management guidance from headquarters that now CERP projects are required to create an adaptive management plan during the planning process. And what this does is it allows adaptive management questions and these uncertainties to be asked during the planning phase, and then actually allows for a budget and a schedule for adaptive management. So it's not trial by error, but it's by taking the information and then using it to either change operations or under active adaptive management, do an experiment to look and see, like the decomp physical model right now is an active adaptive management program where they're filling in some canals and seeing where the flows are going, and then that information is going to be tied right into CEP when CEP is implemented. How we'll use that information to see where we think the water is going to flow. So this would really help in terms of getting that data accessible in a faster time frame.
I had a question. Go back to the slide with the partners that are on the team. Okay. So if you look at all these agencies at the top, and we heard a little bit this morning about the project that's been done for the Florida Department of Agriculture. Each of these agencies has information that gets provided and restore or recover, but then each of these agencies has their own data and their own analysis and their own systems and their own GIS data. How has that worked with CERP and what you guys are doing?
So I think we try to leverage a lot of the information. So the monitoring assessment plan, that is, recovered data or, Everglades data. And then each agency, kind of collects their own data. And part of what we're trying to do is, especially with the monitoring locator, is leverage that data. So, USGS has all these gauges out there, and we use that data, and that data feeds into, a lot of our PIs use that data for, okay, we're going to go out and sample, but it's dry right now, so we're going to hold off, and we're not going to go out and sample right now. And the Water Management District does their yearly report. We leverage that. The task force has a science coordination group, and they do an ecological indicator report. So they look at some of the key indicators and produce a report. And they use some of our data, and then we use some of their data in our system status reports. So you do have these, agency databases that we try to feed into as much as possible. And then we have our map database that we're trying to, get a view of the system. But there could be much better communication between them. And a lot of it is a different purpose for their monitoring. A lot of it's regulatory monitoring or monitoring for a different purpose than what we are looking for.
Any questions, thoughts from the audience? The other question I had was, maybe I was under a rock somewhere. I was completely unaware of the NEON project until Stan told me we were doing part of that for this conference. Do you guys have any interplay with them at all?
No. And I'm hoping from this conference, we can get some ideas, get some, networking, and get some, ideas from all you smart people on better ways we can manage it, or different ways, and leverage, the tools that are out there.
Chat for a minute. I know it is in your panel, put you on the spot a little bit. What do you think the timeline is for integration of NEON, where all this data this is deep and rich and over a long period of time data. How could that data be integrated in what you guys are doing?
We realize that there's lots of other legacy data sets that are out there that are really important. We're charged to be somewhat standalone, but providing interfaces to be interoperable. So it's us to be able to work together to figure out how to make that interoperable and what that would look like. And we're doing that with other entities right now, we're anticipating there's resources to be able to build larger, more federated data sets with legacy data sets and new data. We all recognize the importance.
It just seemed to me you guys are going to gather some new data all over the country. We've got the EPA data that's been gathered for 30 years all over the country. We've got a deep and rich set of data in South Florida.
And we do work a little bit. We've got the two tower sites down there that are Overbauer and Star. They're both on our advisory boards, and all the protocols that are there are the same NEON protocols to help facilitate that interoperability.
Yeah. And then maybe ask a question of one of our university folks that are here is, what interaction do you guys have with CERP and the Water Management District on sharing of data, and more importantly, not just sharing it, how do you use it?
What I mean?
I'm looking at you.
I would say, speak of the Water Management District, they've been very good about giving all the data to us. And they have a very, very long record. It's goes back almost 100 years. We've been able to use access to look at aquifers, basically stream performance. With Eric, it's the case also with insurance. But the issue is, I would say fundamentally, we don't know yet what to do. We're still trying to.
Hopefully some of the discussions that we're having today and tomorrow will help us. Go ahead. I thought you had a question here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm noticing is there's some big, expensive new projects going in, but yet a lot of the long-term water quality monitoring stations are being unfunded. That seems like a huge loss. Is there anything that we can do to help stop?
I think, at least for my perspective from CERP and the monitoring assessment plan that we run, we had a huge cut in 2012, just because budgets are being cut everywhere, and it was if we're not implementing CERP projects on the time frame we originally thought, do you really need to keep sampling quarterly for seagrass, or can you scale it back to do once a year, and so part of it is just, trying to, lobby your local politicians to get Everglades restoration to continue forward. We get a lot of, public input, especially from the estuaries that get blown out, during the wet season, and, a lot of that, public outcry and the public stuff actually does, factor into some of our funding levels and what is deemed important and not important. And it's using of the data, and we need to do a better job as the scientists in CERP of, showing our relevance. And that's one thing that, I always kind of hearken to, our colonels as they come in every 3 years, and we have to keep reiterating the message that the true value of the monitoring assessment plan and recover is once the projects come online. Because if you kind of cut us so much that we are no longer monitoring enough information, once you start building your projects and they're in the ground, how do you know you're being successful? How can you then go back to the nation and say, oh, look, we've restored this? We need to be able to have the data available and the information and the science to say, yes, we've restored, or we've made this much progress, and these, we expected to get this many benefits from this project, and we're getting those, or we're not. So maybe we need to look at operations and tweak that, or maybe we need to change a feature. So it's really, getting the importance of the science to try to keep the funding, but it's been a constant struggle for the funding.
Hank was talking about the challenges of interoperability, and I was wondering how you guys, the Florida Coastal Everglades LTR is run out of my shop, and so we have a big database program, a database manager who lives, up here and stuff, and I was wondering if you're attempting to link any of those sites and all of that data.
Yes, definitely. LTR is definitely, you guys are there and, leverage your data. But yeah, it's getting that linkage. And I don't think we're quite to the point where, we can pull you in. But yes, we leverage that all the time.
Gretchen, one of the things that I noticed is, and this is, I kept up with the recovery function from when it began. And the idea behind recovery was really measuring success. How do you know if the train has gotten to the station yet? And one of the things that was built into the system that I think could be used as a model is that the decision-making part of it is built into it because of the fact that of the three major components, because planning, evaluation, and assessment is a part of decision-making, but the fourth component is actually leveraging the knowledge you've gained to get to the decision makers is the one that Recover actually never put a component into. And so part of that has to do with culture, I think, because of that those agencies that you see up there are very structured in how they deal with what they come up with. And they don't want to step on toes sometimes. And I think from Hank's perspective, that is even more so because their focus is just a system of stations all over the continental U.S. that gathers data. And so we still haven't answered the question of I just wanted to, but there are components in that one that I think are worth looking at.
We'll take one more, and then we'll get to our lunch break. Go ahead, yes.
I just wanted to comment on Stan's comment at the end and stimulated a thought. Why we still don't know why we're doing it, and that gets back to this issue. You talk about monitoring. People say that we got rid of monitoring programs, and we throw that word around a lot. And I think the problem with it is that we have a lot of sampling programs, and we don't have monitoring programs. In fact, we're not doing a very good job of initiating sampling programs that would inform effective, efficient monitoring programs. And because we haven't done that, and we just continue to collect data, and we don't know what to do with it, then they get abandoned. And that's our fault as either scientists, management agencies, or whatever. And we really need to wrap our heads around that problem, or we'll continue to suffer.
Thank you very much. Folks, we've got lunch over here. Go ahead and grab something, and then we'll get out and go with our lunch speaker. Thank you very much.